Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I get together and we're going to talk about a different film from the horror genre, from your well-known classic down to that rare gem banging a co-ed on its kitchen table, the back of your video store shelf. This week, Tim and I are going to talk about the 1980 slasher horror thriller, He Knows You're Alone. Tim, I feel like you're an expert on this. What is the scariest thing about getting married?
Yeah, I've had some experience with that.
I was trying to find some way to pose this without sounding like a jerk, but I think we're going to have some good, we're all in good fun here.
Right. The scariest thing about getting married, if you do it the traditional way, I would say that the scariest thing is just trying to make everybody happy, which is the biggest mistake that you can make. The best thing you can do, one of my weddings was in Las Vegas, and I think that that's where everyone should get married, because if somebody makes the effort, and this is for people that don't live in Las Vegas, our listeners outside of Las Vegas, if people make it there, if they take the trip there, it means that they want to be there. It doesn't mean that people that didn't take the trip didn't want to be there, but
exactly,
if somebody goes to the effort to land at a destination wedding, it means that they're there, they're excited to be there, they're happy to be there, they're just happy to be a part of it. And then that is so much better than just being surrounded by too many chefs in the kitchen trying to tell you what to do and how things should be. I'm telling you, I not only from my personal experience, but also acolyting for weddings when I used to go to church and was in a Lutheran school, when I worked for the floral industry. I'm telling you, I've been around a ton of weddings, and you have never seen a couple fight more and bicker about more bullshit than their wedding. So it's just, I think the scariest or worst part of it is just trying to make everybody else happy, and then getting through with it, and then realizing, like, God, did I even enjoy my own wedding? like what did we even do? Like, I don't know. I think that weddings can be really fun.
Yeah,
and
I would do mine way differently if I had another one. But I would marry the same person. Yeah. No, I do not see myself marrying someone else again. But if we had some sort of re-wedding, my wife Nancy, it'd be very different. Or if we had never married and we're getting married for the first time, or however the unlikely scenario. Yeah.
Married an additional person, keep Nancy around. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, I do like Nancy's in the movie we're going to talk about. I like Nancy a lot in that one, but we're not jumping ahead there yet. I do want to say, while yes, you've had one traditional wedding and a Vegas wedding, I had a great time at both. So you put on a good wedding.
Well, they're good. And that's the thing. Like, now that I actually officiate weddings, or have for a few years now, like, I always tell people, like, get involved. Like, what's a poem you like? What's a ceremony you like? What's a song you like? Like, design this thing. It's kind of your chance to sort of design and put like a program, almost like a show together. Yeah. And I get really excited. Weddings can be super fun. They can be super awesome. I've done a little bit of everything. I mean, I've had people.
They can be awful too, man.
Yes. Yeah.
Not to disparage anyone's religion, but our
Catholic
15
wedding?
Catholic wedding ceremony can jump off a cliff.
Right.
Don't involve me in all of that. Have a separate private ceremony for your personal relationship with your Lord.
And you know what? I remember the last Catholic wedding that I went to, aside from just being way too long, in the rehearsal for it, the priest was just really an unfriendly guy. And I remember I was sitting next to a mutual friend of ours who was also raised Lutheran. And while we weren't really practicing anymore, or really believers anymore, I was really put off by the fact that we would be denied communion because we're not Catholic. It's like, we've been taking communion our whole fucking lives and you're not going to give it to us here. Like, I thought that was bullshit. And then the second thing was one of the little, I don't know, 3-year-old ring bearer was just having a little fun. He was this cute little guy running around, and we're kind of doing the wedding rehearsal. And I literally, like, nobody else was paying attention, but I just happened to be focused on the priest. And I just saw him like look down and just say, "Get out of here," to the kid. And I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, so creepy. Like, I thought you guys were supposed to like those kids, but like a little too much. But no, he was mean. It was a long wedding. Does anyone like a Catholic wedding? Everybody hates a Catholic wedding.
I mean, I guess some Catholics, but they feel like they have to, right? They can't. Right. Yeah. I know what you're saying. They don't really deep down.
Right.
No one's like, that was too short.
Well, what's funny is it's like one thing or the other. It's either the Catholic wedding, which is, 3 hours long, or it's the weddings that I've done for folks that are not religious oriented. And I'm telling you, I'm begging couples to pad it. Like, you have to understand, if you have a wedding without any other ceremony to it, or a poem or a song or something like that, it's literally 5 minutes. 8 minutes if you're stretching it. So they go quick.
That was mine. It actually went on way longer than we wanted because they never told my father-in-law to like give Nancy away. So he almost did the whole ceremony while they were still standing together. So ours was like twice as long as we wanted, and it was still 10 minutes. Sorry, everyone who had to drive out to our ceremony.
But you made the good choice of having the wedding at like, it was, I want to say it was on a Friday at like 5 o'clock. And it was during like the work. So like nobody, myself included, like couldn't go because it was at 5 o'clock. We're all working.
Yeah. But we all made the reception.
Yeah, no, that's great. You know what? I've done that a million times. And I'm telling you, that's the best way to go to a wedding, is just to be invited just to the reception and just show up, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm down with that. Well, cool. Well, guess what? Weddings, big theme into this episode of He Knows You're Alone from 1980. It was written by Scott Parker, directed by Armand Mastroianni. Mastroianni. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it stars Caitlin O'Heaney as Amy, Don Scardino as Marvin, and Elizabeth Kemp as Nancy. It had a little budget of $250,000. It made $5 million. I'd say that's a hit. That's like 20 times. And also we should say, and we'll get to him, but it's the silver screen debut of America's Dad, Tom Hanks.
Yeah. And it's funny,
which is why this is a listener suggested one. And I think that's why it was suggested. And I'm glad. I kind of went into this one a little apprehensive, but I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier, you see so many slashers from the early 80s, and a lot of them kind of run together, and they're all pretty formulaic. So it's kind of nice to see a set of fresh faces. I mean, I've seen Slumber Party Massacre 1, the original, like, I don't know, 20 times. I could watch that movie over and over and over again. But I will admit, even though I don't necessarily like this movie more than Slumber Party Massacre, it's great to just see a new set of faces.
Yeah.
So
it's funny you say that, because the killer in this was very Russ Thorne to me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you kind of liked it subconsciously. You're like, just something about the killer. I just like him.
Yeah. Well, you're right. The similarity is so close that I'm like, God, are they trying to make him look like him? But he's also sort of like, what's kind of funny.
But what year did Slumber Party come out?
That came out in 82.
Yeah.
So it's actually,
so were they copying this?
Well, maybe.
Oh my God. All that Peacock talk was bullshit.
But you know what's so funny about both guys, though, is, in that Peacock thing included, is that like neither one of them are like overly frightening. Like,
no, this is the least intimidating.
I was watching this movie the first time I watched it with a friend. And the first glimpse that we see of the killer in He Knows You're Alone, he's got like a navy peak coat on, and he's dressed kind of nicely, I guess, like kind of cool. But he's just got this like disgruntled look on his face, and he's not like a real tall guy or big guy. And the person I was with is like, he just looks like a scene kid, just like looking down on like new music these days, like just judgy, just kind of like pissed off and disgruntled. And yeah, there's nothing like overly menacing. He's one of the most like forgettable killers. Like, it's
because I know he's got a name, but I don't remember what it is.
It's Ray.
Ray.
Yeah, it's a shame about Ray. But the thing is that it's so weird because I've seen this movie twice, and it's not like this movie has Ray the character. It just has the killer.
Right.
It's almost like you are watching a character more than you are like a specific person. Like, I know that guy's the killer. But that's really it. There's really no connection to him otherwise.
Yeah. Here, let's throw the sum out real quick,
yes.
and then we can dive into this one. Okay, here's Nan's sum for He Knows You're Alone. Amy and Paul are getting married. I didn't look up the name Paul. I'm pretty sure it was Paul, or is it Phil?
Paul sounds good.
Okay, we're going to go with Paul. It really doesn't matter. Amy and Paul are getting married. While Paul goes off with his friends for a bachelor party, Amy stays to get the finishing touches in order. Little does she know she's being followed by a killer who preys on young brides. And little does he know, but he's being followed by a cop who preys on bride killers. Hopefully, Amy can survive the weekend so she can marry Paul, who no one thinks is a good idea anyway.
I just looked it up. It is Phil.
It is Phil. Damn it. Damn it.
No, but it could go either way. It's
the movie doesn't want him to exist, so fuck it.
Right. And more on that later. But yeah, I'll tell you, as a premise, I like it because it makes logical sense. Like if somebody had never heard of this movie, you could kind of reel them in a little bit by saying, hey, like, women are alone on the night before their wedding because it's bad luck to see the groom before the wedding. So they're apparently, because their groom isn't around, or groom to be is not around. Apparently they're completely defenseless. Right. But we're, we just kind of take that with a grain of salt. I mean, it's
1980.
Take it in stride.
They were pretty weak back then.
But I do like that concept though, because it gives you like a level of believability. Like, okay, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
The first thing that jumped out about this movie is kind of funny. It really doesn't have anything to do with the actual film itself, but how many titles of films do you know that have a complete sentence? Isn't that it? I mean, like, and
that's true.
I will allow for the understood you, like you know what I mean by that, like in grammar, where if I say close the door, it means you close the door, right? So throw mama from the train could be one, like with the understood you.
Sure.
Death becomes her, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But there aren't a lot though. There are like surprisingly few.
Right.
So that kind of jumped out at me, like, that's a nice full sentence. And it also came out, interestingly, at the same time that When a Stranger Calls.
It's the most complete thing of this movie, I'll say that.
Right. It came out when A Stranger Calls came out, the exact same time. And there was actually a marquee in New York where the director, when he went to go see it, it actually read on the marquee, when a stranger calls, he knows you're alone. Like it actually read like an even fuller sentence, because they both were exactly, released at the same time. But no, it's an
which can I also real quick, another thing I noticed, When a Stranger Calls, way more people alone in that movie than this one.
Yeah, right.
There is a lot of public things going on, and he knows when you're alone.
Right. He knows you're alone, or he knows when you're alone, and he's frustrated because you're never alone. That could be the full title.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but no, it's I like the concept. You have to take a few things with a grain of salt in this movie because of how it came to be. What you've got here is, I'm going to go ahead and say, pretty shameless ripoff of Halloween. Oh. It has a couple other movies that it emulates too, but this is is clearly, everybody admits this, that it was MGM seeing the outrageous success of Halloween, which was an independent film and made millions upon tens of millions of dollars. And so they said, okay, boom, we can do that. We can do something at a low budget. We can film it really quickly, and we're going to be just as successful. Just give us basically a clone of Halloween. So they're going to make it down in Houston. And the original executive producer that they had on the movie couldn't get the money for it. So they had to work with half the budget and in Staten Island instead of Houston, which is unfortunate for the crew and actors because it was in December of 1979 that they filmed it in Staten Island. And New York in December is not warm at all. So this is the most heavily clothed movie that you will ever see. Like, I mean, it's scarves and turtlenecks that look like they're going to.
That is not really something that sunk in when I was watching, but you are right. Like, there is not a stitch of, unless they are in the shower, no one is exposed at all.
Yes. Yeah. It's layers. I mean, that could have been an alternate title. Speaking of alternate titles, you had originally it was Blood Wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Then it went to Shriek. Then it went to The Uninvited, which actually became a movie title of another movie years and years later.
Yeah.
And then they thought that it test audiences.
Is Shriek what they called the fake Scream movie? No.
Stab.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah. There is a movie called Hide and Go Shriek, which is, we should cover that one.
Stay tuned. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So yes, Tom Hanks feature, you know, he auditioned. He was really kind of intimidated because it was a lot of Broadway people that were sort of associated with it. And he thought he was really hitting the big times, and got into it and you know, was so likable. Like you mentioned this when we were talking earlier, so likable that they didn't even include his screen death, which is written into the script. But they're like, we like this guy. Like, we don't want to kill him on screen.
Yeah.
You know? And they should have had him in the movie more. I really think that. I think he should have been cast in one of the lead roles. But the roles are a little goofy in this movie. And I want to go back to what we just said a few minutes ago, something that you kind of touched on. Do you feel like we even need to be introduced to the group of guys who are either engaged to or dating the girls?
No, because I forgot they even existed.
Right.
Because we were halfway through the movie, and because everyone keeps talking about how she shouldn't marry Phil. No one thinks she should marry Phil. There's not one person who stands for Phil in this movie.
Including
and I was
yourself.
like, I can't wait to meet Phil. Like, what's wrong with Phil? And then there's a part where he calls her later. So, and then I'm like, oh, right. The guys, and they went off because they make a comment about picking girls up. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me and how I remember how I was when I was younger. That just kind of seemed like something that would happen. Like, yeah, you just like cheat on whomever during your bachelor party. Like, that's a thing that happens. So like, I wouldn't have even considered that a bad guy move in 1980. But then the only other time we see him is when he's removed himself from that and is calling her. So the only trait I see from him is him making a good gesture to call her and see how she's doing.
Right. But it is a little jarring where it's like we get that introduction of the guys in the beginning before they go off on that bachelor weekend. And then, yeah, you're right. We literally don't see him except for that one phone call. And it just felt a little, I either don't have the guys in it at all, or maybe don't even have that phone call or something. It was just, it kind of felt like if you're going to introduce me to them in the first place, that I figured that there should be more of them. The same problem also happens with the police in the movie, because this movie also tries to interject a little bit of what's called a police procedural, which is just a really boring ass name for a movie or a TV show that follows like the investigation of a crime or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's okay that element is in it. In fact, I read an article that compared this movie to a giallo, which is Giallo is an Italian genre. It means yellow in Italian. It's a genre of films that is kind of half mystery, half horror. That's where you get your directors like Dario Argento and Mario Bava and a few others that are real kings of that genre. It's got a lot of defining characteristics, tons of bloodletting, really bright, unrealistic blood, really interesting camera work, lots of colors, usually an unknown killer until the final act, but also mixed in with mystery elements and detective elements and police work and that sort of thing. And so this movie kind of felt like Giallo style, but it just it didn't quite fully take it through to the end. And there are just
that's a running theme in this movie.
Right.
Didn't quite make it through.
Yeah, like there's nothing wrong with the guys that play the cops, except for that one dude that looks like he's rotting in front of our very eyes. You know who I'm talking about? That one weird faced guy. He's got like his hair is like a Caesar cut on top, but it's like really feathered on the side, and he's got like a really weird pronounced British face.
Yeah,
but it's like but he looks like a skeleton. Like he looks like a skin covered. Well, I guess that's what everybody. I was going to say like it's like skin on top of flesh and bone,
without the muscle in between. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
but yeah. So those kind of come in and out. You kind of wish that there was a little bit of a better balance between the investigation of the crime, which is kind of interesting. It gives us a little bit of a tethering to the backstory of this killer, and you wish that was a little bit more intermixed. But
yeah.
But yeah, what I was going to say, though, is that it goes back to the fact that because they had a reduced budget, because they made this film in literally like 2 weeks, from beginning to end, from pen to paper to write it to final cut was 4 months, which is like a split second in the movie world.
Yeah.
And so it's a little rushed in its filmmaking. But I will say, just like you said, there were some elements of this movie that I really liked.
Yeah.
And so what parts of it did you like?
I mean, I really liked the concept. I know it is easy to see this is just like, taking advantage of the popularity of Halloween. I did like the idea of it being wedding focused because we still have that horror trope of it surrounding a day, but it's like a fluctuating day, right? It's not like Halloween where that's one day of the year. Like anyone can be having a wedding at any time. I liked there was the, we got the cops, like there's a cop who has a personal investment in this case, and they never really cross over until the very end. So you're almost getting two stories of people dealing with this one killer. I liked a lot of the characters, as tropey as they were. They weren't terrible. However, with everything I liked about this movie, every single part just was missing something, and it was all kind of missing different things, but just for whatever would have made that one part really great just wasn't there, or like a connection between the character. I just felt this movie was really awkward. It was the best word I could come up with. Like just the motivations are kind of there, but then the actions surrounding them are inconsistent, or you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah. No. I know exactly what you're saying. One thing, and I really like a point that you just made about Halloween being like a set date, like a specific time. One thing that is so great about the film Halloween is that because it takes place on or right around Halloween, no matter which way you turn, there is the feeling of a horror movie, even when it's just a babysitting scene and the kids are watching a scary movie on TV. There's something always reminding you that this is a horror movie. Somebody could walk into the room during you watching He Knows You're Alone and sit down for 10 minutes and still never know that this is a horror movie. Like right. it could literally happen. Like when Amy's in the ice cream shop with her ex-boyfriend, character's name is Marvin, who still very much wants to be Amy, and very much like you said, one of the populace that does not want her to marry Phil, probably more than anyone. And that scene is so long, unnecessarily long, that it's like I forget that I'm even watching a horror movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it has to be stab fest nonstop, but the tension really drops out in some certain points here.
And you mentioned Marvin. He's a character who comes in, and that's kind of the relationship we see as those two. They've had a past, but it really seems like he's popping into her life for the first time after a long time in this. But they are so, and this is another one of those things where it's like, it's just a little off because they are so familiar with each other, and he is so invasive of her privacy. Yes. Like she's in a changing room at the bridal shower and he just pops his head in. He fucking just like, no, even in whatever fantasy world you dreamed up, that's not okay to do, no matter what kind of relationship you have. I don't even know if I'd be comfortable doing that to my wife. She wouldn't be comfortable with me doing it. Like, you're vulnerable in there. It's weird.
An interesting scene. You know what I really felt like that was kind of a nod to. It was very similar to the Juliet balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet, because he's kind of saying like, can I see you tomorrow? What time? Yes. You know, there was a lot of similarity there. It was kind of interesting. But you're right. It does, even if they dated, which we're given to understand that they had a relationship prior. They were
close to getting married. Like that's his regret, is not marrying.
And then
her.
He went away for a summer. She fell in love with Phil, and then they broke up. So yeah, he still very much wants to be with her, but you're right. He's kind of just around all the time. And yeah, he
just comes into her home.
Yeah. Visits her all the time.
I would get it if they hung out all the time. Yeah. But if you just ran into your ex on the street and then they walked into your house, you'd be like, you're crazy. You are right. That's why we broke up. You're insane.
Right. But then again, they make that point about him saying that he brings her a fish every time he visits, and there's 8,000 goldfish in that fish tank.
Oh, I missed that line.
Yeah. He says, I'm going to bring you a fish every time I visit you. And you know how many goldfish are in that goddamn tank. There's a ton. They're hanging out all the time, actually. But that's what's odd. It's okay. Because
again, inconsistent.
It's weird. Yeah, it is weird. The one thing, but like I said, there are some interesting things about this movie. The opening scene is really pretty cool. I should say the opening scene is a direct ripoff of Halloween. But then when we go into this scene in a movie theater, which is a very cool movie theater, everything is in Staten Island, so it's got to be somewhere over there. And it's these two girls, young women, watching a horror movie. And what's interesting about this is that actually they didn't, kind of turning the tables here. Wes Craven sort of ripped this off in Scream 2 by having a murder within a movie theater while a horror film is playing. Yeah. So that's kind of cool that they sort of.
Which I read the director was trying to pitch this, and he was pitching because the opening scene is the classic urban legend, the guy with the hook and the couples in the car, and they hear the scratching on the car.
Oh, you're right. That is the very first one. Yeah.
Yeah. And which then that is a movie they're watching, which then opens up into our real life murder in this movie that we are watching.
Right.
But I heard that he was kind of pitching that idea and they were just losing interest. And he's like, but that's a movie within this other movie that is now, this is the real one. And that's how we got this movie. He wanted to make the Hook Hand movie.
Yeah. And it's funny, a couple things about that segment. So, they actually are filming, obviously they had to film the movie within a movie in order to have something up on the screen to some really bad, like green screen effects.
Oh my God. That's so
kind
weird.
It's kind of almost adorable because it's so bad.
Because they do film in a theater, like.
Yeah.
But then when they showed,
when they projected onto the screen.
When they do the shot of where the screen's behind her, obvious screen, like one of the worst green screens I'd ever seen.
Yeah. But in this quote unquote movie that the two girls are watching while they're in the movie theater, It features an actor that was a guy that we liked in Chopping Mall. So I noticed that. I also noticed how cold these poor actors must be. You could see their breath when they're outside because they're filming at night. It's probably 30 degrees. I actually looked up the average temperature of Staten Island in December and it's 30. It's a low of 30. So they're freezing out. The girl's in a skirt. One thing in that movie within a movie, that little segment there, not to dwell on it, but she calls out to her boyfriend, whose name is Don. I've got it written down here. She says Don 8 times in 2 minutes. And I found myself like Samuel L. Jackson, like, say Don one more goddamn time. Like I was just, I just couldn't like
dare you. I double dare you.
Say Don again. But yeah, I was distracted by that, but I thought it was kind of funny at the same time.
That's hilarious.
But the other thing is that when we get the actual kill in the movie theater, the knife that the guy uses, he goes through the theater seat because he's killing her. He sits behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's sitting behind her. He stabs through it and it's such a little incision that it almost looks like it might have felt good. Like I want somebody to do that to me.
It's
like
a tiny blade too. And like for it to make it through the wood of the seat,
right,
and the seat itself, and she like dies instantly.
Yes. You don't die in 8 seconds from a tiny little scratch in your back.
Yeah.
Honestly,
like he doesn't even do anything where he like can hold her and really force it in. Like, so she instinctively like pulls away from it too, I'm sure. So it's not.
Honestly, it almost looks like it feels good. Like
but
it's
again,
that minor.
I think that's a cool idea in a scene where you kill someone at the kill in the movie. That's great. They just missed all these little marks.
Yeah, it's the execution where,
and also he knows you're alone, and the first kill is in a very public space.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
He knows you're alone, but that's not when he'll be showing up.
Right. And we do get introduced to the cops at that point. You'll see a familiar face there, Paul Gleason, who played the principal in Breakfast Club, and the other cop, the one who has sort of a connection to the case, he looked familiar, but I couldn't place him.
Yeah, I didn't know who that was either. I think he was on, I don't know. He didn't look familiar to me.
Yeah,
he wasn't bad.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. Yeah, he wasn't bad. And I like how people look in this movie. Like I said, filmed in 79, released in 80. So it was before you get all that nasty 80s feathered hair. Like these girls all have like straight, like natural looking hair. Everybody looks cool. Very kind of 70s, early 80s dress. Like everybody's got like these great sweaters on, and it's just, it looks cool. Like,
wait, let me ask you this real quick. Yeah. Did you get that the cop was, because we see a flashback of the first time our killer kills a bride, and it's implied that it's like his ex and he's at her wedding and he kills her. Did you understand that the person she was supposed to be marrying was the detective?
Not in the scene, I didn't. When she's killed, no. But I did.
Do they make a reference to that? Because I must have missed it. Because I didn't realize that until after I was reading about it afterwards.
Yeah. Other than
I just thought maybe he was on that case and the guy got away, and that's why he was so.
Yes, that was my first impression, that he worked the case and that it was a cold case, but it still haunted him to that day. That's kind of what I felt. You're right. That was my first impression. And then I kind of put it together that, he was the groom to be, because Paul Gleason tells us that later on, like 3/4 through the movie, we finally sort of like hear that spoken.
Oh yeah. He tells that.
He's telling the flesh guy. Yeah. He's telling him like, that groom was whatever, detective.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Which, another thing where I'm like, they just didn't go the right way with it. Then that doesn't make our killer a guy who just targets brides. That was a very personal killing. He killed his ex-girlfriend. It wasn't right. It wasn't like he goes after brides. He went after his ex. And then the only other killing we know about is the one that just happens. Yeah, the one in the movie theater.
Yeah,
so how you make that fucking connection?
Yeah. If I eat like Indian food one time, it doesn't mean that I am fucking obsessed with curry dishes, you know, like I just hadn't tried it one time. But yeah, you're right. He kills one bride, but fucking gets labeled for the rest of it. He gets typecast as the bride killer.
Right.
Jeez. But we quickly see here's kind of another fun thing about this movie. Lots of these familiar faces just popping up left and right. I was overjoyed to see the cops questioning somebody that was in the movie theater, played by Steve James of American Ninja 1 and 2 fame.
Oh,
the African American.
I love that
gentleman.
Couple, man.
Yeah. They're cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Steve James. That guy fucking rules. I love the American Ninja movies. So that was a real treat for me.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
But
That's been a while since I've seen those.
But the Halloween, the borrowings from Halloween start early and often. There's that one scene, my God, where Amy's walking down the street, you know, down the sidewalk, and you're like, my God, just make it obvious to everyone.
She looks out her window and he's standing there in the yard.
And the music, holy God, what did they change? Like a note? Like, I mean, you just put a rest in somewhere and like exactly the same. But you know what, though? Everybody loves Halloween. So even when it's watered down, it's still kind of fun to watch, you know?
It worked for a reason.
Right. But
the three friends, or her two friends, there's a scene at the beginning where they're in a ballet class, and I don't know if I didn't understand. It seemed like they had never been in that class before.
Right.
And were just frustrated at being in it. Like, just do it if you want to do it. I don't think that was part of their college curriculum.
No.
So if you're so angry about being in ballet class as a 20-year-old, don't go to ballet class.
Yeah, it kind of felt like they were doing it like when somebody decides to like pick up a hobby, you know, that's what it felt like. They were trying it out.
Yeah.
But
one of them dragged their two friends to yoga. Like, you gotta try this.
Right. And the funny thing about those friends is that I didn't dislike Amy, but I liked her friends a lot more. I mean, here we are supposed to be invested in our lead, and I'm telling you, it's critical. It's really, really critical in a formulaic slasher that you got to at least have a final girl that people connect to or are attracted to, or, you know, is compelling in some way. And there's nothing wrong with this final girl, Amy, but there's nothing really right with her either.
Right. Yeah, no, she's very just kind of a tepid, formulaic character.
Kind of has that Margot Kidder thin face thing, early 80s thin face lady. Like, you know, I mean, it's just a type. It's just a type.
Yeah.
And
I don't want her to die, but I don't care if she ever gets married.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if she gets back together with Marvin or.
Right. And then what's really cool is just right after that dance class scene, here comes yet another familiar face that I couldn't even, because he's been in so many movies. Yeah. I just literally looked at the screen and said, is that fucking guy? And it was that fucking guy.
This movie's a who's who of who's that.
Right. Right. And still not really
I knew him as the guy who, like, my go-to brain was like, he's the guy who interviews Michael Douglas in The Game. Like, he's the one who like does his initial Game interview.
Is he in some of the Bourne movies? He seems like he'd be in a Bourne movie.
Probably. I mean, I'm looking at his thing. He's been in, you know, over 100 films and TV shows. So
yeah, tall.
And he passed away. I didn't know that.
Oh, tall guy. I mean, here we are describing the guy. Trust me, anybody who's listening to this, you've seen this guy.
James Rebhorn is his name.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just been in everything. But yeah, everyone would know him as the guy with short gray hair. But in this, he's got kind of shaggy, blondish, darkish hair. So it's only the face.
Right. And so, yeah, another familiar face. There isn't a ton of super creative camera work or filmmaking in this movie, but coming up pretty quickly after that, there's a scene where Amy is, of course, now being followed by our killer, Ray. And I did enjoy that real quick scene where she's looking at a TV in a store window and seeing herself. There's the camera facing outside, so she gets to see herself on the TV set. And then when she moves away, the killer is right there. I thought, now it's a little weird that she didn't sense a guy standing 6 inches behind her, but it was a nice little effect there. I thought that was cool.
Yeah. How did he know she was getting married?
Oh boy. Oh man, that's a good question.
Because there's no personal connection between them. It's the other weird thing. Like, our killer really has not that like Jason Voorhees ever really hunted down anyone in his family, but it was very random. But it's never explained like, oh, he works at this bridal shop and is able to do that. There's no Dollar Hide Red Dragon thing where it's like, oh, because of this, he's able to know who's getting married. Unless he just happened to overhear her talking about her wedding next weekend, and it just went bing, like a spring goes loose or something.
It was that he just happened to be, why nobody thought this was weird is strange.
Yeah. It's why he looks like he's going out for a walk, because that's what he was doing.
He's just standing there in the scene in the beginning when the guys are getting ready to go on their trip. And the girls are talking about, they'll probably do this and that at their bachelor party. And he's standing there, that Ray is, But other than that, like, he just happened along and happened to hear about somebody getting married. Like, that's incredibly good luck if you're a bridal killer.
Yeah.
Like, I would look at the newspaper for engagement announcements.
Another inconsistency. I know I said, where this guy's getting pigeonholed as a bride killer. Now, what about all the other, because he kills a lot of other people for no reason who aren't brides.
Yes.
So will that cop then argue, like, I guarantee you he did not kill those people. They are not brides.
Right. Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'll be your defense lawyer and try in court if you need me, because I know you didn't kill her friends and her professor. You only kill brides. I know this.
And how does he even know to go to the professors? I mean, unless he's just watching. I mean, because
but he's watching Amy all the time. Yeah. Why does he go and if they're in Amy's house, fine. But he just goes to the professor's house for whatever reason and kills those two ancillary characters for no other reason than to just have two other people die.
And boy, does that scene go on too long, because we've got this professor character. We've got the friend Joyce, and it's just kind of like widely accepted and embraced by her friends that she's going to fuck her professor to get a good grade. And everybody's even like supportive, like hugging her before she leaves the bridal shower. Like, good luck fucking your professor.
Fun getting an A.
Right. And so, but they play a game of cat and mouse. And trust me, the funny thing is that there are girls like this. I mean, there are women that just really like a lot of just goofing around ahead of time.
Listen, I'm going to say this as a man who didn't know how to handle himself around women. I would be the one, like, let's just play around games more before I have to actually get serious here.
Right.
So I understood it, but if I were a 20-something woman, I think I would play it very differently. Yeah.
Right.
I connected a little bit with Joyce, though.
Also, one part that I hope you didn't connect with her on is the cleanliness of the bottom of her feet when she jumps into that white, linened bed, because they are dirty as fuck.
Didn't notice.
Don't get me wrong. It's an old house, and she's probably rehearsed the scene 3 times before they filmed it. But yeah, some black ass feet that when she jumps up there. Just a quick little notice.
There is a scene where she's threatening to jump out the window because she is still playing around, and the professor ends up pulling her back in the window just as our killer's taking a swipe at her, and it's like, were you going to kill her right then as someone else was standing there?
Right.
You seem to have been pretty careful. That's just for the audience, whoa, close call.
Yeah. And
because had he connected, it's all over.
Yeah. And I'll admit I did kind of go, ooh, like at that scene, like, because it was a real close call.
Yeah.
But here, oh man, it's so weird because we've been like watching these two play grab ass and run around the house for what seems like forever. And then when we finally do get the Joyce kill, it's like nothing. She's just already dead in bed.
She dies off screen.
Yeah.
And then he kills the professor.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. And really hacks away with that dude, at that dude, like several times.
Yeah.
So, and then, because you're right. There are some killings where it's like, oh man, like
there's no blood in this movie.
Yeah.
Like there's
none.
There's nothing. All the kills are off screen. You get blood from people looking at their hand because they've just touched the dead person. That's the most blood you get in this movie.
Yeah. And then there's that kind of strange scene where Amy goes to talk with her priest or pastor about like being a little unsure about getting married and stuff like that. And that's kind of a strange scene. Although I will say,
what's strange about it? Were they fake like the stigmata happening?
Well, that's one part. Yeah. I will say though, it's kind of, it did bring me back just on a personal level. My mom, when I was a little kid, used to work as like a part-time janitor for our church. And so she would go in on weekends and clean and stuff. So I would go with her because I was too little to be at home by myself. So while she's cleaning, I could just run around the church and do whatever I wanted to do. And I would go into the actual, not just the like offices or classrooms, but I would go into the church itself, into the actual chapel area, and just stare at the crucifix for just long periods of time, because it's a pretty fascinating icon for like a 4-year-old, to look at. And I've always been really interested in that symbolism. It's a really interesting choice.
Because in this, I guess stigmata is not right. Stigmata is when you get the marks on yourself. But she's looking at the statue of Christ, and it's literally dripping blood off of it. And, then she hears the organ go off, and she turns and looks, and there's nothing there. I will say I give him credit for how they explain it, because he's like, yeah, my cat jumped on it. Because you're like, there's no way a human made that noise, because she immediately looks and they immediately show it. Like, even with a suspension of disbelief. But then he seems very chill about the rusty water he's just like, that's just shitty water flowing down this giant statue of my Lord and Savior.
Yeah. Sometimes when I don't even want to have to go all the way to the bathroom, I'll just piss right up here on the altar. Like, it's
all garbage anyway.
Around, I'll be forgiven.
The priest gave me some real bad vibes. He just seemed super creepy with no real reason to be creepy other than he's in a horror movie.
Yeah. And maybe it was just because the actor is like, why is this scene even in the movie? But I mean, I will say I do like the interior of a church as a setting. Like, I mean, you got candles, you've got like iconography, you've got stained glass windows. Like it's a neat little setting, but it's a strange choice of scene to insert when you could have a lot more killing or action in your movie. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I want to talk about,
I did forget, going back to our first kill. I just saw this in my notes. The cops did say he severed the spinal cord into the heart.
Oh, really?
That's how she died. Yeah.
So he pushed her spinal cord into her heart.
Well, when he stabbed her, he both severed her spinal cord and then got that knife into her heart.
Well, I know that this is a work of fiction, but I'm going to tell you that didn't happen.
No, it
did not happen.
It's a very specific angle that's got to happen.
Right.
But this guy's not adverse to there's a scene where he's literally trying to stab repeatedly the windshield of a car.
Right. Yeah.
He's not one to give up.
When you just focus on killing brides, it's such a niche market. You don't get a lot of practice. He's just working this shit out as he goes along, But I will say another, I keep throwing these out, but that's just because there's so many. The Amy's younger sister, I didn't write down the actress's name. I recognized her. She had such a recognizable
face. Dana
face.
Barron is her name.
There it is. And she actually played the role of Nikki, who is Brandon's girlfriend on 90210 for like a season or half a season. So,
for the even older listeners, she's Audrey from National Lampoon's Vacation.
Yes.
which is what this was the age she was. Because I saw her and I was like, oh my God, is that from The Exorcist? Blair.
Linda Blair.
Linda Blair. I was like, oh my God, is that Linda Blair? They look very similar.
Yeah, there's kind of some similarities there. Yeah. So finally, here we are talking about all these, every actor under the sun, and yet to bring up Tom Hanks yet, but that's because he doesn't pop into the movie for goddamn near almost an hour.
Yeah. And again, in the most awkward way that isn't resolved the way they set it up. Because Nancy mentions that she's been seeing this guy jogging and how cute he is. At that point, you're like, that has to be Tom Hanks. Because, I kept waiting. I'm at every background actor. I'm like, is that Tom Hanks? Am I forgetting what Tom Hanks looked like when he was young? So then, yes, you finally see him jogging. And Amy's like, well, go get him. She's like, okay. So you're like, oh, Amy's going to go get him. Then the next shot we see is Amy jogging. Tom Hanks is like sitting down on the edge of the trail and he trips her.
Right.
To get her attention. Like, what the fuck was her plan?
Right.
To run past him? Like, if he didn't trip her.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't even fucking acknowledge him when she's approaching.
Yeah, she's got a real unique plan there. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know what she thought was going to happen. Like maybe she was just going to run past and he was going to.
But they got a great meet cute. They're a very cute couple.
Yeah, and Hanks's screenness, his relatability, his energy, his watchability. I was wondering if he was going to seem awkward on screen because it was his first role, but God damn if it isn't evident right from the very get-go. Like he really is. You're like, no wonder he became a star.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and as you even mentioned earlier, the director, whoever made the call, he was supposed to die with Nancy, and they were just like, I just like him too much. I can't kill Tom Hanks.
Right.
I don't know what it is. I got a weird feeling. And it's the only right call they made. Like, don't kill Tom Hanks.
Or no.
Unless it is the cornerstone of your movie is Tom Hanks dying. You don't kill Tom Hanks.
No, you don't. And it leads us, it's not too long before we get to, can we go ahead and talk about what is my favorite scene in the movie?
Yeah, well, I do want to say, because it's weird that these two were paired up, because so Nancy's played by this woman, Elizabeth Kemp, who I looked up because I was like, what else was she in? Because she's good in this movie.
Yeah, real good.
And turns out she didn't do a lot, but she like became an acting coach and was like very well regarded amongst. She died in 2017, I think, and like Hugh Jackman and Lady Gaga like made statements about how great she was, and like she was just like she studied under Lee Strasberg. Thank you. Her mentor was Elian Kazan, like just like
huge
entrenched in the in the industry. Just this background figure you never hear about, but had a huge impact on so many people. So it's crazy that her and Tom Hanks were this movie couple, like fucking power couple that no one knows about.
And you're right. She is really great in the movies. Like she gives a nice understated performance. Like she comes off as very genuine.
Yeah. Because Joyce is like obnoxiously college. Like,
yeah.
Obnoxiously college. But yeah, for Nancy, I was like, for a while, I thought she was like the mother of the little girl. I'm like, is she like 35?
Right.
She just seems way more mature than any of them.
And she's pretty in kind of an unconventional way, like not like Gal Gadot, like I mean, just knock your socks off. But she's attractive in her own way, and also gives us our first and only round of nudity in this movie.
Yes.
She has a shower scene, which I'm not really sure why it was in there, but I'm not complaining.
Nope.
And then we go into what is my favorite scene. It's kind of like the beginning of my favorite scene. We get the shower, we get some nudity. Then she decides to go down to the living room and put on a record and get a little high, just lights a joint and has her headphones, those big giant, 70s, 80s headphones. And
the record player, I never understood the point of the record player where you'd put the record in and then it would sharply drop. Like,
Yeah.
what was the point of that? That's a function that was built into
Yes.
that. I don't understand the point of it.
Yeah, you put the record on and then you slide that like stabilizer thing over. It kind of holds it steady and then it just drops onto the turntable. Yeah, it is a little weird. Like, why wouldn't you just put it on there?
Right. Then someone was like, guys, guess what I found out? We can make that pin, instead of making it 3.5 inches, we can make it like a 1/2 inch. You just put the record on it. It's crazy.
Right. Now, I do know that it used to be that people would put multiple records, multiple LPs onto the needle.
Oh, okay. Well, that would explain how
And
that
sometimes
works.
did it have a feature where it could lift up?
There were some that flipped, were self-flipping. Yeah.
But she puts on this song, and I researched the hell out of the song because I loved it so much. It's just like a slow but kind of funky groove, like a real polite, funky groove. Kind of reminded me of maybe some like super duper early Prince, like really early Prince ballads way before Purple Rain, all that stuff. It's just kind of a nice little 70s ballad called I believe that the actual title is Finally It's the Night, but it's referred to as It's the Night Again. And it's like impossible to find this thing. Just about the only reference you can find is the scene from the movie itself.
Right.
And then there's one other video on YouTube that just has a black and white picture of two brothers, and the song is set to that. It's kind of odd. But it's this really like groovy song. You can't, help but just move a little bit to it.
Oh.
And she's getting high. She's laying down. She's got her little beanbag chair, and she kind of detects that something is going on. She takes off her headphones. They do some nice work with the sound where, the sound of the record without the headphones sounds different than when she puts them on. Mm-hmm. They do a nice job of handling that. And then finally, there's a lyric in the song. Oh gosh, I can't remember it, but it's a perfect line for the killer to enter into the room. Something like I come again, or I come to you, something like that. And then we see the killer kind of enter the frame. So here's where I'm like, yeah, they've crafted this scene really nice. And this song just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah.
And he approaches her. I wish they would have filmed it differently, but eventually it's this great juxtaposition of this really sweet love ballad and then him eventually slicing her throat. Later, we find out that he decapitated her and put her head in the fish tank. But the scene setup was really cool. And it made me think about something. And I want to touch on this because I think it's a really interesting topic. As I'm watching this scene, I like the song, I like the approach, and it made me question the idea of, is it right or wrong to think that some of these scenes in horror movies are cool? And I mean that in the truest essence of it. Like, somebody might say, you're talking about young women getting killed on screen. How can you think that that's cool?
Right.
But I'm telling you, there is something about it. I don't wish that any young woman gets
you
killed.
can make something look cool. I mean, Pulp Fiction looks cool, but at its core, they are fucking murderous criminals,
Right.
I mean, yes, in this context, it is far more brutal. Like, it's a woman alone finally, and she is, just being killed for no other reason than she's there.
Right.
But yeah, the scene itself is very cool. And you had even messaged me earlier and we're like, there's one scene that's awesome. And there's one scene where they go in like a haunted house and Amy kind of like at the fair where you're just on the track and it's just lights and dumb shit flashing out at you, which is a kind of a trippy scene. And I was like, oh, this might be the scene he's talking about. And as soon as this scene was going on, I was like, no, this is the best scene in the movie. And it was still a little short. Like, you could have, it's okay to draw that part out because the song is such a jam. It's such a fucking jam. And yeah, he's just slowly walking up to her. If she's completely unaware and is completely relaxed, what a great juxtaposition of tension. If he just walked up to her and just slowly slid that knife into her and she just kind of like comes to, and all you get is a wide eye look and it's all silent and all you hear is that song. It would have been fucking funny. But they got halfway there and then went, now slit her throat. Okay, we're done.
Yeah. It's really jarring if you're like me and you try to listen to that song on YouTube, because that is the only version. So you're just getting into the song and then this like screechy sound comes on.
There are like 3 points in this movie where whomever wrote that song, they wrote 2 other songs in the movie. They sound so out of place, but they, as the kids say, fucking slap. Yes. They are so good. And just these awesome 70s, not quite disco grooves that are just, you fucking are good.
Yeah, they're kind of like Dusties, like they're just just like 70s rock ballads, you know, but they're kind of funky too.
And they're just in these weird, just like, here are them jogging and we need something over it, so it's the best music in the movie.
Right. But yeah, that really, I kind of sat and I thought about that for a while, just the idea of seeing that violence on screen, but if it's done right, if the scene is crafted right, if there is a cool song attached to it, or it's just staged in the right way, like it's okay to equate that to a level of cool that you would reserve for, like, I don't know, James Dean or Marlon Brando, or, you know, just like iconic cool Americana things. Like there's something about the excitement and the danger, because let's face it, one of the most important ingredients of quote unquote cool is danger. If you think about the things that are classically cool in our culture, there's usually some attachment to something being dangerous. Yeah. So I don't think it's that you're not like a weirdo to say like, man, that cool, or that kill, that scene, the way that they put it together was really awesome. You're not saying like, I think that murder is cool. Right. But it's fucking badass when they do it right, you know? Yeah. And that scene, you're right. It's so, if they would have done it exactly how you described, it would have been probably one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie.
Yeah. And then, why decapitate her? He's done nothing like that. Like that just seemed a little excessive. Right. Because she's not a bride. Maybe a bride. Okay, fine. But not even a bride.
And maybe if you had a really good decapitated head in your makeup department to use, then okay. But the one that they do use just looks like shit. So
just don't have that part.
Yeah. And then, you know, as by the time you get to that scene, thank God it's in there. But pretty soon you have what I think, talk about not getting it right. I love the idea of a final climax of a horror movie being a chase scene in the city morgue. I'm great with that.
Yeah.
I think it's
we mentioned that Marvin works at the morgue.
Marvin works at the morgue. And so we kind of have now a sort of combination of our different factors. We've got Marvin working at the morgue. We have Amy trying to find him to get help. We have the police kind of closer on the trail of the killer. So they're all kind of converging here at the city morgue at nighttime. And that's great. Like what I just said there sounds perfect. But man, they even fucked that up. Like the chase within the morgue, it's really anticlimactic, and it's got a, like you said, perfect word earlier, awkward. It's got a really awkward feel to it.
Yeah.
They did not know how to film a well-paced chase scene.
I loved how her being in the morgue is how she finds out that Joyce is dead. You would think Marvin, being the only guy working at the morgue, would recognize her and maybe be like, dude, I'm so sorry about Joyce. And she'd be like, what?
Yeah, you're right. Like yeah, it's just goofy. You know, they try to even throw in like a little extra creepiness with some like tiny little underdeveloped lungs in a glass jar. Like there's some medical stuff. Yeah. Like it's a morgue, so we have to have body parts. Interestingly, they're all body parts that fit inside like a normal, just like ball jar, like a glass jar, you know? Yeah. But yeah, like that poor fucking cop, the one that whose bride got killed by Ray at the very beginning, he dies with such little consequence.
Oh my God.
It's just, he's made it all the way there. He doesn't even get to say like, fuck you, you killed my bride and blah, blah, blah. He gets no resolution. He's just killed right there.
Because he shoots Ray. and then is like yelling at Amy, like, get out of here.
Right.
Get out. And then, Ray pops up and stabs him from behind, and he, because of his magic murder knife, dies instantly again. Ray survives the gunshot, but thank God he didn't get stabbed, or he would have been out.
And the whole time you're wondering, where the hell is Marvin? Like, you keep like, that it's pretty obvious. Like, it's pretty, what I want to say, it's predictable, right? Yeah. So you're waiting for Marvin to save the day, but it kind of goes on forever. And you're like, where did that? I don't even remember where he went to start.
There's so much commotion. He kind of went to check out a noise in the hall. Because let me tell you, there is nothing more alarming in this movie than shuffling. Every character is so attuned to tiny sounds, but then when people are fighting and gunshots are going off, they don't recognize that. Because it's not until she's screaming for him, he's like, what? I'm done checking. I don't see anything in this room, but it sounds like someone is yelling for me.
Right. Yeah, and he's just he's so absent that you almost picture him off screen being like, "What did I come in here for? Like, what am I doing?"
It's like, oh, right, my keys.
Right. But so that gets goofed up. But here's the thing: I thought a lot about this movie being a listener request, and the last thing that I would ever want to do is discourage anybody from making a listener request in fear of us like trashing the movie or whatever. But I will say, and I'm not just sugarcoating this to make our listener feel better. I'm really glad that I saw this movie. Here's the thing. He Knows You're Alone is talked about a lot in horror circles. Like, this is not some obscure movie that nobody's seen. Like, I don't know if it's a cornerstone of the genre, but it's something that most people should be familiar with if you like scary movies. So I'm glad that I saw it.
Yeah. I was just looking at my notes. There is a funny line from the detective, because he finds out. Hold on. First, let me back up. I do have a lot of issues with the cop that we didn't cover. I'll just go over them briefly.
Okay.
He's kind of given this free reign over this case, even though when Paul Gleason gives him the case, because he's hesitant to tell him about it, because he doesn't want him to jump to conclusions about it being the same dude, right? But then he like completely acts on his own without any kind of supervision or any kind of procedure, right? Like he's like, I know who the killer is or where he's gonna be, and they're like, well, where? And he's like, don't worry, I got him. And then in the meantime, he goes to the house that he knows he's going to and decapitates a woman. If I were his supervisor, I'd be like, listen, this is why we share information. Because had you told us where you thought he was going, maybe I could have got someone there sooner and it would have saved a life, right? So there's that. Also, he's like, so when he finds out there's been a murder at Amy's house, he's like, well, is she there? And they're like, no, she went to the morgue. And he's like, where's the morgue? And I just feel like any cop would know where the morgue is.
Yes.
Especially a detective. It's not like he didn't work in that town. So, it's just amazingly inconsistent. Those are my two huge. But the one about, I'm just not going to tell anyone the information on the case that I'm working on. And he also, when they tell him that the bridal store owner has been killed, who's awesome, by the way.
I was really
awesome.
Disappointed.
I've never heard a guy talk more honestly about marriage. He was like, are there days I wish I weren't married? Absolutely. Are there days I would trade it away? Never. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like, it's both the greatest thing and like my biggest mistake. But you know what? That's what marriage is, and it's about compromise. And then he just fucking for no reason gets stabbed by this killer
pair of scissors.
With a pair of scissors, and no one knows. But so then when the call comes in and Gleason's like, oh, it's a bridal store owner, and our the detective's immediately like, that's our killer. Don't tell anyone to touch anything there. Don't tell, no. Like, there was such a stress. Even when he got there, he's like, no one had better have touched anything. And he goes in and there's really nothing he figures out due to no one touching it. He finds a scrap of cloth in the guy's hand that looks like it could have come off of any one of these dresses, and he just kind of haphazardly matches it up to one and goes immediately, this must be the next victim. Like he was sending him a fucking clue or something through his death, other than maybe he was stabbed and was grasping for something as he fell.
Right.
This is fucking insanity. And again, it all could have worked with just a couple other correct things, but they just go, sure, close enough. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's my rant about the cop.
Just as you're saying all that, it just makes me think about, because Halloween is not a complicated movie. How they managed to get so much right in Halloween and for these folks to try to emulate it, and they've already got the blueprint and still got it wrong. And I don't know if they try to jam too many characters in, too much story in. I don't know.
Because a lot of this seemed easily fixable.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm with you. I agree with that. Like the way that I kind of gave it a metaphor for in my own mind was that I like the ingredients that I've got for the meal that I'm going to cook. They just cooked the wrong meal.
Yes.
They've got the cast isn't bad. There's a lot of actually people that went on to be very famous and or very at least successful in the industry. And so it's not a bad idea. You got a good cast. I don't know if everybody is perfectly cast, but there's enough here to make a much better movie. And the thing is, you and I say sometimes, like, in a good way, man, I don't know how they packed so much into 90 minutes. Same sentiment here. I don't know how they pack so much into 90 minutes, but not in a good way. Right. I cannot believe that this movie is a minute less than 2 hours, because it just has these long stretches of not a whole lot happening. Right. But again, I'm not going to completely rain on this parade. I think it's kind of harmless. That's the best word that I have for it. It's not going to make or break anything. It's not an awful movie.
Scary. So if like someone's like, I don't want to watch a scary movie, you can still watch this movie.
Yes. It's got probably more in common with a thriller than it does.
Yeah. It's worth watching just for the people in it, where you're going to be going, oh, that guy.
And I will say, I am glad that somebody spoke up. I am glad that we had a listener that said, hey, what do you guys think about this one? And it doesn't mean that we're going to do everyone that comes across, but I like the fact that somebody even cared enough or was interested enough in this show to offer that up. So I would ask people to continue to do that.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that pretty much covers this one.
Yeah, that's you know what? I'm just trying to see if I have any more little bits and pieces here. Yeah, that's pretty much
recommend.
Let's see. On a day like today, a snow day here in the Midwest, you don't have much else going on. Yeah, give it a watch.
Yeah.
If you're having a bunch of people over and you're like, ooh, what should we watch tonight? And everybody's super excited. There's some other titles along the lines of this movie that I think you'd be better off with before this one.
I agree.
But if you're a horror hound, like if you really, really love horror movies and scary movies, and sometimes you just have to cross a couple off the list just to say, hey, I saw it and I can speak intelligently about it. See it.
Yeah. Yeah. I give it a soft recommend.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, Tim, next week, we're going to bring it home, man. We're going to talk Chicago. And we're going to talk, this movie is a lot earlier than I thought it was. I thought this was a 90s movie. This is from 1988, Child's Play. How this is like 4 years removed from like some of the movies we've covered. It floors me how long time lasts when you're a child. Right. Like, because if you told me 4 years now, it goes by in an instant. So, And
you know what?
Did I say what the title was? Child's Play. Child's Play. So okay.
And speaking of staple movies that every horror hound should see, I'll be honest. I don't know if I've ever watched Child's Play in its entirety. I know that I've seen like the beginning of it before. Maybe I did, but I honestly can't remember much of anything from this movie.
I've seen this movie maybe 15 times.
Wow.
I love Child's Play. I love Chucky. This might be our, Evil Dead antithesis one where you're like, I just don't get it.
No, I'm excited to see it. I mean, for God's sake, it's child's play. For God's sake, it's Chucky. I have to watch this movie.
Like, I remember just like the anticipation of watching the Siskel and Ebert review of this movie. Like, I could not wait. I thought it was the coolest idea, which it wasn't even a new idea, but to, 12-year-old me, I was like, whoa, what?
Yeah. No, I can't wait. I am super excited. And it was filmed in Chicago too, right? It doesn't just take there. Was it filmed? Okay.
I'm sure. Cool. Yeah. Most of it, at least, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The apartment definitely looks like it was in Chicago. Okay. So that was He Knows You're Alone from 1980. Please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Our email is slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Our Patreon is .com/Slumber Podcast Massacre. Huge thanks to our patrons for helping make this possible. Tim, do you got anything else to say about He Knows You're Alone?
It's the night again. You're all right again. You have to play that song during that. Yeah, just pull it off and insert it in here somewhere. I got to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely try and do that. Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, then, excellent. That song's a jam. Listen to it. All right, Tim, we'll see you next time. Bye.